January was like a full month without me. How much did you make in January?
Yeah, January made I think three five.
3,500. Okay. What did you make in March?
March we increased it to a little over 33,000 and securing that pipeline and those conversations with ease.
Being a woman in spaces what did you change in your sales process while still being you? What was the change there?
So I think the biggest shift there was understand that out of respect for my time and the person's time, that I'm really here to talk about business and understand what their pain points are, knowing that I could help them solve those problems. I think it's actually straight to the point. I've now heard compliments of like, this was a really clear call, or this is something I really understand. Thank you for putting this together so quickly. That's another, I think, thing I have heard probably now in the last month than ever before in the last 4 years.
Welcome back. Today we got another student interview for you. This is going to be a little bit of a different one because this isn't your typical high ticket sales rep. Obviously she sells expensive shit, but not the same as what a lot of you are used to. So without further ado, Shanika, tell the people, who are you? What do you sell?
Thank you, Nick. I'm Shanika Hillocks. I am a consultant specializing in brand strategy and marketing, and I offer three services to potential clients: brand strategy, influencer marketing, and experiences, which is our iteration of event production.
Okay. And what kinds of companies do you usually work with? How big are these companies usually?
Sure. These are large companies that range from, the Walmarts of the world, so large Fortune 500, Fortune 1, enterprise hospitality companies where there's a lot of stakeholders, i.e., real estate individuals or investors who are looking to find their place in the hospitality space, as well as
Hmm.
annualized events like I would say festivals and concerts. We've also touched that sort of business. And so just now being into the 4 year mark of the consultancy, while the growth from a client roster side was expanding, my actual sales practice was not. And so I was really happy to lock in with you to really learn some new strategies and ways of working to really activate my pipeline.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. So these are very educated people. They're smart people. Would you say they're pretty aware of sales tactics and of processes?
I would say yes and no, especially
Okay.
because my main points of contact are primarily in the marketing space. I may have founder contact one to one, but I've also been in the situations where I have been like an interim independent contributor via an agency. So procurement and some of the high level folks aren't necessarily the interface that I deal with on a day to day basis.
Okay. And before we get deeper into the weeds there, we started working together. It was February, right? So January was like a full month without me. How much did you make in January?
Yeah, January made I think three five. In January it was really quiet, and I kind of took the winter break reset, not really thinking of how I could activate on my end.
3,500. Okay. What did you make in March?
March we increased it to a little over 33,000 and securing that pipeline and those conversations with ease.
Come on. 3.5 to 33 grand.
Mhm.
So so let's talk a little bit about the sales process, right? Like we could get deeper into the weeds. Both like internal things that you changed and external. So let's start with the internal. Being a woman in spaces that there's a lot of women, but there's also a lot of men.
Mhm.
What did you change in your sales process while still being you? What was the change there?
Sure. I would say, just from a marketing standpoint, I have a personality online and an energy that I absolutely hang my hat on. And prior to working with you, I was really kind of putting all of my bets and resting my laurels on being likable.
Mm,
So I think the biggest shift there was, yes, I had this amazing network and Rolodex, but I was not moving them through as the leader and the guide. So first and foremost, activating that Rolodex. I remember one of the things you had asked me was how I get like new business. And I was just like, Instagram here and there, and people like me, but I was not getting into their DMs, emails, phones, and really making sure that I was regularly speaking to them, not a week out, but like days out and on multiple platforms if I had their number plus their email. Two,
hmm.
really cutting down a lot of the niceties and conversations. I was very much so someone who would chat about the weather, chat about a beauty product. So it would compliment me and kind of I would get into the weeds about like what I'm wearing for the day. And creating that sense of authority. I love how you put it, tapping into my inner bitch a little bit really allows for me to command the energy, understand that out of respect for my time and the person's time, that I'm really here to talk about business and understand what their pain points are, knowing that I could help them solve those problems and how they want to fortify their businesses.
And what did you notice in the shift in how they treated you with when you made that change?
It's almost like a mirroring or a witnessing, I would say, right? Like people want to be seen and want to be understood, but it allows for folks to really dive into questions and being clear about the answers when we ask those questions. Or if they aren't clear, I think it unearths their, maybe places and spaces where they've made mistakes or mishaps or have been dragging something, or the problem isn't as big as it actually is, to kind of wrap it into that urgency and need for collaboration.
Hmm.
In addition, I would also say I think it's actually straight to the point. I've now heard compliments of like, this was a really clear call, or this is something I really understand. Thank you for putting this together so quickly. That's another, I think, thing that I have heard probably now in the last month than ever before in the last 4 years.
Nice, nice. And so when you were more likable, right? And you're still likable, but more of a leader. When you were less of a leader and more likable, what would you get at the end of the call? Or what effect did that have on your sales process versus your sales process now, or sales cycle, my bad.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I could like show a physical example, I would say this, it would felt like this, right? There was such a long lead, and a kick of the can almost weeks on end. I even looked at some old emails where, goodness, yes, I might have closed a deal that felt okay, but it took 2 to 3 months. Now we're talking 2 to 3 weeks. So
Mm.
just having that decrease, or the kind of accordion come back to a closer cadence, has really helped benefit me. And I also want to speak about, I think, something that naturally is reflective of women. I know me and my friends talk a lot about like the mental overhead, that we're constantly thinking about things at this like running track. And so the ability to really squeeze that down from months to weeks also just cuts down that overhead. Like, hey, either we're moving forward or we're not. I'd love to get to a final decision. Thanks, and keep it moving rather than kind of building and hoping and wishing. We actually have real dates and gates now to understand how many calls I need to take within a quarter or a month or a year to make a specific goal.
Yeah, a lot less mental clutter. At least if you get a no, it's a fucking no, right? You don't need to keep chasing them down. And like cleaning up that pipeline. And so that was the more internal stuff within you, right? When it comes to external, like things that you implemented on the call, you touched on a little bit of not asking them how the weather is and shit like that. But things you implemented on the call, what we did with pipeline, like what external changes led you to 10x in your income?
Absolutely. From an external perspective, even just the ways in which I had language around my Calendly to book things, I would not now. I do not end, even if it's a discovery call, getting the proposal call on the books, on that proposal call, getting the decision call on the books, and articulating that. I think in prior experience, I would recap everything in an email, then put it on an email, then try to go back and forth and toggle the availability. Just asking someone, great, like, can we put up our calendars right now? How does Tuesday at 10 a.m. sound to you? Just being very explicit and knowing that I am also moving them through a journey, which then puts me into that leadership position, and is a dialogue in which people oftentimes aren't saying, oh, no, I can't get back. And if they are, they're probably
Yeah.
not the client or the partner that I want to work with.
Yeah, exactly. Again, cutting down the mental clutter, right? And so somewhere there's a woman listening to this and she's like thinking to herself, I want to lead my calls more, but I don't want to be super masculine.
Sure.
What would you tell her to be able to change that, like to still have that balance?
Sure. The first thing that comes to mind, Nick, when you ask this question of me, is how silence is so powerful. I
Mm,
think right now in the zeitgeist, there's a conversation about like the soft life and feminine air, but actually, like, I think a lot about being strong in your own is actually letting the silence hold that power and that space.
mm,
Being clear about the questions and not necessarily needing to fill it, right?
yeah,
Allowing a pregnant pause, even though it might feel awkward, because it gives the mic to the prospect to
yeah,
really think about what they're sharing with you. And if it makes them feel uncomfortable, I think that's an opportunity to really move them from their hell to heaven and really double down on what you can offer them and the confidence in knowing that your service or your product is very well the solution that they need.
Yep, we can't lose the silence game, right? And I remember hearing your calls, and that was a big thing, is like losing the silence game. So that's good. That's a big one. And so, actually, I haven't asked you this before off camera, so I'm curious how you answer. We may or may not keep this, Marquise, but I know you sell to both men and women, right? And when we look at this, like what you call inner bitch energy, or what I call inner bitch energy, do you feel like men or women have treated you differently with you being more assertive or have respected you more as a result of you being more assertive? Or do you feel like that's been the same?
I'm not going to say I feel like they respect me more, but I get my answers clearer. We move
Mm,
client calls clearer. Even the
mhm.
length in which, the time in which I would even put together agendas and things, it's like boom, boom, boom. What's the status? I also feel very excited to like be less of the person who's having all the answers based on what they tell me and passing the mic and saying, great, how have we implemented this? And here's the solution. It's more of a dialogue and a collaboration, which really makes me feel like a more energized partner. Um, it really helps me level up on that advisor level. And I've actually realized that there's more trust, specifically with the clients who have now been retainer, to ask me questions. And yes, there might be scope creep to some degree, but if they're asking me, it's because they trust me. And if
Not
I'm
telling you, right?
yeah,
Hmm.
exactly, exactly. And it allows me to make recommendations across the team, for instance. Wonderful. That sounds like the GM could best answer it, but here's my recommendation on how I'd approach it without being like, let me stop. Let me go ahead and put this whole like proposal or a talk track together for you. It again just has that synergy where I can still sit at the nucleus of kind of the sphere of my clients and their teams.
You have more influence, it sounds like you're more of the operator, right?
Yeah,
And you had some objections on our call, right? You actually had quite a
I did.
few.
I did.
Um, what do you remember what your objections were?
I think immediately I started to think about, from what I recall, I either said something in my head about like, what if this doesn't work? What if we don't see
Hmm.
the results? And I think even as I started to even understand kind of the sphere of who you work with, what if I'm just like the not the right fit or the right customer size because of my experience, like you said, in my pipeline and the discovery process. But one thing, and I have to big up you, and I think this is something I share kind of in my feedback as well. Like, yes, it was wonderful to hear other folks moving through their own successes, but the one to one bespoke opportunity and time that you took to really understand my experience and then create a system that still had your core pillars and tenets, but also allowed for me to feel empowered in the ways in which I show up was extremely valuable.
Hell yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. So the women who want to receive, allow.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll say that.
And so like if someone is listening right now, and I know this was your first investment in yourself as far as sales, like you've invested like tons in yourself, but this was your first sales development investment. And you've been doing this for years though, right? And sales has been part of your business for years. And so the person who's listening to this, who's also been doing this for a while, it could even be a few months and they know they're not getting the results that they want, but they're in their own way. They're not investing into themselves. What would you say to them? Like what kind of internal dialogue did you have for you to be able to pull
Sure.
that trigger, even though it wasn't easy?
What's more scary or more, frightening to you? The discomfort of moving through some need to think about an actual sales frame, understand how you approach someone and talk to someone, or not being able to fulfill H2 for your year for your business, or even like the next 3 months. I'll say that. I
Yeah.
also think too, yes, it's so empowering to sit in an entrepreneurial or like consultant fractional seat. And in the same breath, it is probably the most uncomfortable you will feel on a recurring basis. And I think the quicker you can kind of understand how to fortify yourself, energize yourself, be centered in your practice and have that accountability, the farther you will go.
Amen. Amen. That just hit someone's in their soul. Well, cool. That is all I've got. Any last words for the people here?
Yo, highly recommend. Okay, Nick is practices what he preaches, which I think is another good thing to take into consideration. There's a lot in the ether right now. There's a lot in the zeitgeist, but really having someone who embodies, is invested, without also belittling, or really just taking the time to understand and walk you through it. Yeah, it's incredibly, incredibly invaluable. So,
Thanks again.
yeah.
Thanks
Yeah,
again.
man.
Well, sorry, were you finishing up there? I think I interrupted you.
No, no. I think
Okay.
help your post edit. I don't know if I said valuable or invaluable, but in any case, valuable.
Thank you. Well, as she said, I work very closely with everyone that I do, so I can't take on the world, but still have some availability. So if you want to jump that learning curve, maybe 10x your income in 2 months, maybe hit the link in the description, speak directly to me. We'll see if it makes sense. As always, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you in the next one. Peace.